Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I would love to hear in your chat, how's your day going so far?
Hello.
Hello. Thank you guys for joining. This is a great session. We had over 200 people just a few minutes ago in our last session, so I think you guys are in for a treat. So glad you're enjoying the conference. We will start right at 3:30. So if you need to take a break, go grab something to drink and come back, feel free to do so. We will start right at 3:30.
All right.
Hello, Tamara from Halifax. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I bet, Castle. I bet you do, Catherine. It's a great session. Thanks for joining us.
I think we hit our pacing.
Yes.
Good. Thanks for monitoring the chat there.
Yes, and I will do that in this session as well. So, hello, Jamie. Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you as well.
Can you hear the piano in the background, Nicole, or am I okay?
I cannot hear the piano.
Okay, my husband is a professional jazz pianist and he's a doctoral student. He's teaching a lesson right now and I was a little worried you were going to be able to hear him in the background.
I cannot. Hello, Durham. Hello, Greensboro and Wayne County. Glad to have you guys with us.
Hey, everybody.
You guys are right around the corner from me in Raleigh. Glad to have you guys here. Welcome, Harnett County.
This is wonderful. My gosh.
Yeah, Jackson County. Thank you all for spending time with us this afternoon. We really, really are grateful for that.
Absolutely. Especially on a Friday afternoon.
All right. We got Guilford County, Marlborough County, Columbus County, Orange. All right. Halifax. Richland 1. Great. Moore County. Welcome.
It's like a roll call.
I know. Greenville. Welcome. Get some more Wayne County in there. That's awesome. Hello, Roanoke Rapids and Kershaw. Welcome. Guilford County, and hello, Wake, right here in Raleigh with me. Johnson County. Hello, Gaston, welcome. We are covering both states today. Look at everyone. That's awesome. From the mountains to the sea. Welcome, Vance County. All right, we have just one more minute. I will tell you while we're waiting for that 1 minute to tick down, we are going to ask that everybody stay off of your video just for now so that we make sure that we don't have any glitches in video. We have a lot of people we're expecting on, and we want to make sure that our sound quality and everything stays great. So I do have everybody muted as we come in, and we will at the end take questions and give you an opportunity if you want to come off mute and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. Feel free as you guys come in. If you have any questions or any comments in chat, I'm going to manage the chat for Jen, and we will take points of, in different points in time, we'll take time to stop and answer some of those questions. So don't think that they go unnoticed. They do not. You guys are in for a treat today. Jen is with us, and we feel like, I mean, just after the last session, I feel like my blood pressure has gone down quite a bit. And I think what you're going to find is we're going to go through some activities that for you and will help you individually, but I think you're going to see a lot of things that you can apply to whether you're an administrator, you're a teacher, even if you're a parent. You're going to see some, and Jen's going to point those out. What can we do to help our students and our parents and those that report to us if you're an administrator? So I'm not going to take any more time because every minute is precious here, and this is a great presentation. So welcome, and Jen, feel free to take it over and introduce yourself.
Great. Am I off mute?
Yes.
Everybody, oh, great. Wonderful. I am so glad to be here with all of you today. One of my favorite things to talk about is social and emotional learning. At Edmentum, we're growing our resources around SEL to better meet your needs, both in our current courseware products and through our partnerships with companies like Reflection Science and BASE, and soon we'll be offering some curriculum around that. My role at Edmentum is to help support this growth and integration and to be a thought leader and a resource to all of you. Here's a little bit about my background. Before I came to Edmentum, I was a school administrator, a teacher, a TA, a coach, a resident director. I did these things both in elite boarding schools and in high needs residential settings. Most recently, I came to Edmentum in October after being the program director for a community-based juvenile diversion program that partnered with local schools in Rochester, New York, where I live. And I ran 2 non-secure detention facilities. Understanding behavior and helping staff and students understand their own needs and regulate their behavior has been a constant through all of these settings. Even though those settings are very diverse, one of the things that I've learned is social emotional learning is for everyone. And as a supervisor, I used a lot of these strategies with my teams to make sure that they were well and feeling cared for so that they could deal with students who maybe were living in moments of trauma. So I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about some skills and some ways to support you. So what's happening? My gosh, you've been asked to become a virtual teacher overnight. You've been trying to figure out packets and support at-home learning. You're dealing with overwhelmed parents, or you probably are one yourself. You're supporting students to try and find out how to learn at home, to share a device, and to take care of siblings all at the same time. Are you dealing with the fact that some students have more resources than others? In fact, some teachers have more resources than others. Do you worry about the care and the safety of your most at-risk students? One of the things that we know is often we ourselves are at risk in certain ways when we're in times of crisis. You might be juggling your own family needs. It can feel like things are out of control. We have a lot going on. In order to get through it, grounding ourselves in the ability to manage our impulses, think flexibly, name our emotions, and figure out what we can control is essential. Research is showing us that in order to learn best, our basic needs, including safety, have to be met. As teachers, counselors, parents, school administrators, and others, we know that students learn best when there's a routine. When these things go out the window, going back to executive function and social emotional learning is a great place to start. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to try and help you understand why you or the people around you might be feeling this way. I'm going to allow you to identify the kinds of things that you have control over, give you the skills to support your own well-being, and empower you to transfer those tips into self-awareness and self-management to help students and parents and yourself. It's important to remember that we all react in different ways. Even though what's happening right now is not normal, the feelings that you may be having, they are normal, and you're not alone. So let's check in for a minute. We have a poll that we're going to launch here, and I want you to think about the word that best describes how you're feeling right now. Overwhelmed, optimistic, sad, hopeful, or something else. And you're welcome to chat in if you have a different word. Okay, I see we have a neck and neck race here between overwhelmed and hopeful. You might be feeling both of those within the span of 5 minutes or even through this presentation. Hopefully some of the hopefulness has been because you've found today really helpful. Disappointed, disorganized, for sure. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Great. I love some people are feeling optimistic. Wonderful. So some of you are overwhelmed, sad, or afraid. Others might be feeling happy. You get to connect with children, your own, and you get outside or you're learning a new skill. You might be watching the environment recover. Some might be happy but feel guilty about it. And others of you might be so busy that you haven't even checked in on your feelings. Sometimes that feels easier. This is true for everyone around you. You can help normalize this for yourself and your teams, your students, and your families. This is a great activity to do with your teams before opening a meeting. I also have a recent blog that I posted around 7 ways to start a meeting with social and emotional learning. Nicole and I will make sure that we share that with you in a follow-up email. So let's get a little understanding of how the brain works and how it can help. First, let's look at why and how we respond and the role of executive function and inhibitory control, as well as social emotional learning, self-awareness, and self-management in helping us through it. Remember, our brain is wired for survival, and some even live in the survival brain due to trauma. We know this is the fight, flight, or freeze response. Right now, many of us are having this non-thinking response to things that are going on around us. While it's an essential response when we're faced with a wild animal or a fire, like my comic strip below, in situations like we're in now, we often need to be flexible thinkers. And this protective response can pose a challenge. Let's look at a little more about what's happening. So one of my favorite ways to teach this is through Dr. Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. And you can see that, you know, your hand looks a little bit like my picture of the brain here. And this represents the brain stem. And on the inside, you have the amygdala and the hippocampus. This is the reactive part of the brain, or the reptilian brain. We often call this the go part of the brain. Go, go, go. When you wrap the full brain around it, this for our purposes today is the prefrontal cortex, and that's the stop part of the brain, the executive function and planning part of the brain. And when your brain is working smoothly together, it looks a lot like this fully connected fist. Let's talk about what happens when we introduce an alarm to that. Remember, this is a great teaching tool for kids about what's happening in their brain and how it's connected. You can use it really easily, particularly with younger kids. So our brain in times of stress is in a struggle between survival and logic. When we're in a crisis, our reactive brain tries to help us survive by popping the top on logic. As you can see, when our brain's closed and working seamlessly together, we get those responses that we're most pleased with. In situations where we feel overwhelmed or anxious or fearful, our alarm hijacks our thinking and it pops our top on logic. At that point, we're functioning out of our reactive brain, or this go part of the brain. It's important to know that this go part of the brain, it's nonverbal. It's also where we store trauma, and it's responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze response. And essentially, it's told us to stop thinking, right? The important thing about that is to try and wrap some control back around it. Let's look at it in terms of a few examples that you might relate to. When we're alarmed, the first thing we get is a trigger. All right, and so in this case, the first one is a student. The student gets a bad grade. They feel disappointed. Disappointment could come from all sorts of reasons, from the way that they feel about themselves or things and expectations at home, lots of things, and that's a whole nother conversation about this sort of chain of command. But for now, we get a bad grade, we feel disappointed, and the reaction is to blame the teacher. Now, we know that's not logical because obviously, if you're a teacher, you know it's not your fault that that child got a bad grade, but that's the reaction. And that might look like a child who slams their book or tips their desk. They get really frustrated easily. For us as an adult, maybe you've had this experience. It's one I certainly relate to. You might get an email that doesn't feel good. Maybe it's correcting you for something that you did, or you feel like it's a misunderstanding. In those moments, you feel adrenaline shoot through you. And that adrenaline serves to pop the top on your brain. It might feel like anger. And our response to that is to immediately send off a response and try and defend ourselves. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Have you ever had that experience? You can chat that in. We'll take a look. Often when this happens, I'm going to pop up and look at the chat here real quick. Oh yeah, definitely. Depends on the time of the day. Yep, sounds familiar. Absolutely. It's called being human, for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I do, but I wait for my response. That's great. Anybody who waits for their response has not popped their top. It hasn't triggered them yet. Well, if it is a fight, flight, or freeze response and you've popped your top on your logic, often after you send off that immediate response, a little while later, you might wish you hadn't. What we want to do is create a moment of pause, and that person who chatted in that they paused before responding has done a really good job of illustrating for me the fact that what we want to do is we want to wrap our brain back around our impulsive brain and calm our reaction and look at how we felt and what happened. You know when your alarm has been triggered because you'll hear yourself in your head or out loud say some of these things. Take a breath, calm down, get control, give it a minute. I probably should walk away. At these times, when you're saying those kinds of things, you're helping yourself or a student reset and re-engage the full brain. It's important because this helps us move from a sense of things happening to us to a sense of what we can control. The goal of the pause is to help regain control. Really what it means is we're using executive function, inhibitory control or impulse control to wrap our full brain back together. Once we successfully pause, then we add self-awareness by asking ourselves some questions about what happened and how we're feeling. What I want you to do right now is just take a minute and think of a time that you reacted to your alarm. Did you respond before thinking? Did you notice your alarm but ignore it? Or did you pause before responding? Remember that this alarm was designed to keep us alive, but our environment is different, and sometimes it goes off in reaction to things that are not immediate, and we want to reset it and add logic. Nicole's going to put up a poll now for us. While you're putting your response into the poll, I'll give you an example of how this happened to me. Just the other evening, I snapped at my husband. He called me on it, and I realized I had just come off a phone call where people were unloading their fears around COVID. In this case, my compassion for them and my desire to relieve their suffering, I forgot to be compassionate to myself, to take a break and check in and re-regulate. His calling me on it, that was my pause. I needed to reset and take some time to reflect. Yep, I see people here. And the other thing to note about this is sort of evenly split between responding without thinking and pausing before responding. And that may be because of the event that you picked as well, because one thing we know about executive function is we have hot and cold executive functioning. And cold executive function is, you know, using your impulse control when there isn't a lot at stake, when you maybe don't feel as invested. And hot emotional reactions, hot executive function is when maybe there's money involved or status or some emotional sense of importance, ego, that kind of thing. And so you may have answered all of these things in your head, but thank you so much for sharing them with us. Okay, so let's just take a second and review what we've learned so far. We want to re-engage the logic brain. In order to do that, it's important to create a pause or a reset to re-engage inhibitory control. This helps us move from a sense of things happening to us towards a sense of what we can control. We then want to use self-awareness to assess our feelings and ask questions. Create a plan using self-management. I hope you like my little lemur here, got my guy here, but I don't recommend saying calm down, bro, to anybody. It's just a nice way to illustrate the point. Here are some questions that we can ask ourselves as we work to build self-awareness. What's causing my reaction? Is it fear? Do I feel overwhelmed? A sense of sadness, anxiety, or frustration? The bigger your vocabulary around emotions and the more vocabulary you can give to those around you, the much better you are at getting to the source of something. I'm sure you guys have all had the experience of having a conversation with a teen or even an adult, and you ask them, how you doing? And they go, fine. Or you say, what's going on for you? And they say, I'm mad or I'm tired. And you never really get to the core of what's happening. And sometimes we don't even feel like answering truthfully. The bigger that vocabulary, the better off you are. Secondly, and sometimes first, you want to ask yourself, how is my body reacting? Is it tense? Is my heart racing? Do I have breathing changes? Can I not move? Am I teary? Our body knows what's going on for us before we can name our emotion, oftentimes. And it is also a chemical driver in our response. Next, you want to ask yourself, what was the trigger? What was the thing that popped my top? Did Zoom or Google not work? Were parents not engaged? Did kids not have the needed resources? Was your home life interfering? Have you been inside too long? Or did you just not eat breakfast this morning? Each of those things are so important and can contribute to popping our top, but all of them really require different responses. And finally, did my reaction address the actual need? Did blaming the teacher help that student pass or improve their grade? Or Did answering that email quickly really get at what was going on for me and the emotion that I felt when I saw it? Helping build self-awareness skills supports success. It lowers anxiety in stressful times because it begins to move us toward what we can control. This is essential for all of us, and it's transferable to our students. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you can help students build self-awareness. And for those of you who are administrators out there, this is something that you can use with staff as well. Naming feelings and identifying what's happening to them and in their body is a really good practice. Through an assignment like a phone call, an email, or during an online session, you can normalize their emotions. There are lots of diverse ways to address social emotional learning, and because this is a conference about equity, it's important to know that these can be done in all sorts of ways. You can say things to people like, you might be feeling lonely because you miss your friends. I miss my friends too. This could look a lot like needing to be online or sleeping more. You could be teary or want extra attention from those around you. Tell me how you're feeling. You could also say, you might be feeling frustrated because you want support on your work. It's a challenge to learn new ways of doing things. I'm learning new ways of doing things too. This might look like you being angry or snapping at people or even crying. That's normal. Finally, you could also say you might be feeling overwhelmed because you're helping take care of your siblings. You might find it hard to focus on your work or just remember things in general. Can you hear the noise in the background here? Pretty crazy, right? And I have a teacher friend who works with high needs kids, and she's actually taken the noise in the background and turned it into Easter eggs that she embeds in her lessons. And when kids can discover them or identify them, she has like a challenge for them, a bonus. I thought that was pretty creative. It's important to remember that you can also say those things to yourself. Now let's talk about self-management. How do we determine what we have control over? Because trying to control the uncontrollable is a sure way to pop your top. And if you're like me, you like to be in control of things. And often we try to manage things that aren't things we have control over. We try to manage their behavior or other people's. We try to predict what's going to happen or wonder how long things like this will last. It's important to focus on the things you can control. You can control your attitude. You can control how you respond to the restrictions around you. You can practice kindness or turn off the news. Let me give you a couple more examples. You can't control the internet or whether parents are available to help with learning. You can't control when school will be back in session or if you were prepared to be a virtual teacher. You can control reaching out to others, staying connected, creating a teacher group for support, or a virtual happy hour. You can also join Edmentum's educator network, and there's lots of cool ideas on that. I want you to take a minute here and just pause. Reflect a little bit about something that's been weighing on you that you can't control. Once you've identified that, I want you to break it down and think about an aspect that you can control. We have practice doing this. We do it all the time for students when we need to break down assignments or concepts for people. Chat in some of the things that might be weighing on you and maybe an aspect that you can control. Here's an example. I can't control the resources I have, but I can control letting my students know I care. I can't control when school will be back in session, but I can control how I use my time. Let me give you a couple of examples of some other things that you can do. Don't do everything at once. Identify the emotion that you're feeling and where it comes from. Take breaks and try not to feel guilty about it. Just do your best. I think, Jessica, we might need to mute you. Give positive messages. Thank you so much. Do small things for others. My guess on this one is that probably that's one you're really good at, and you might need to flip it and do small things for yourself. Create a routine. Get enough sleep. Take walks while practicing social distancing or just get some exercise. Encourage community. We did the bear hunt. We did it as a zoo hunt near us because not everybody had a bear. And we asked the kids to draw chalk drawings at the end of their driveways of their favorites so that when people walked the street, they could see. Create a happy hour. Talk to others about what you're feeling. Check in on your mood and turn off or limit social media if it makes you worried or anxious. Self-awareness and self-care are two of the most important things that we can do at this time. We all know the comparison of putting oxygen on ourselves first. Since we can only control our own response and it impacts those around us, start here. How many of these things do you think you're doing? What we're going to ask you to do next is to pick one of a list that we give you. Try to just focus on one. If you're like me, you're going to want to focus on more than one. But we all know that when we create long lists for ourselves, it becomes a little too hard. In fact, I heard a quote just this week that says, achievable plans are better than perfect ones. I really like that. I found it helpful. Nicole, do you want to put up our poll for us? Perfect. And I'm going to just take a quick look in the chat while you guys are answering that. Yep, I can't control not being able to see my students again this year, but I can control reaching out to students and families. Internet speed, can't control it, but coming up with creative solutions and scheduling, absolutely. Someone's turned off the news. I'm sure lots of us have created routines around that. Yep, I can't control that school has closed, but I can control how I interact with them for the next month. Absolutely. Yep, I'm seeing a pattern here. I think you guys, like me, taking a break without guilt and getting more exercise are runaways there. I told you I live in Rochester, New York, and getting exercise has been a real challenge for me up here in upstate New York. But it is starting to warm up, so I'm appreciative of that. The last session we did, someone wrote and told me how wonderfully the weather was where they are. So I'm happy for you if that's the case. All right. So also creating a self-care plan is another way to support success. That's a really important thing that you can do. And we could talk about that at another time if you find that helpful. Here's what you can do for your students. You can address student emotions up front and validate them. Giving students language for emotions and being really clear about what you notice and see and helping them articulate it is so important. You can create a video that talks about building routine. You can normalize challenges. I'm learning how to teach online, just like you're adjusting. You can focus on building connections. We all know that relationship is everything, and you guys have mentioned that already in the chat. You can chunk your assignments, use distractions to your advantage, check in with parents, and remind people that they're cared for. If you don't see your kids through an online platform, write them a letter. Let's keep going here. Here's an assignment for students that might be helpful. It's based on some SEL perspectives. You can talk to kids about thinking about their morning routine. What does it look like? What are the components? And that can vary based on age. What mood were you in when you woke up in the morning? If it was hard to get out of bed and you were feeling tired and sad, how did you go through the motions? What did that look like? And would that have changed if you had been happy? And you can talk through what some of those changes might look like. It's really important at the end to flip the mood from whatever the one is that they start, so that they start to see some baseline behaviors and some things that they can look for to help them address it. Secondly, help students think about simple acts of kindness. They can do those for those around them. Research shows us that we feel more in control and positive when we're helping others. In addition, it might be helpful to know some things to look for that are common in people who are experiencing stress and trauma. These aren't character flaws, but they're responses our body and our brain have to challenging times. Being aware of these things can help guide your response. Here's some things to look for. Stress and trauma impact our function in lots of ways. Some cognitive symptoms are memory problems or the inability to concentrate, poor judgment or seeing only the negative, anxious or racing thoughts or constant worrying. You guys might be experiencing the inability to concentrate from many of those around you, particularly kids who are feeling sad about losing rituals like graduation and prom. You can look for behavioral symptoms like eating more or less, sleeping too much or too little, withdrawing from others, or procrastinating or neglecting responsibilities. There's emotional symptoms you can be aware of, like anxiety and agitation, moodiness, irritability, or anger, a sense of feeling overwhelmed, loneliness, or isolation. This is not a comprehensive list, but it's some of the things you might be likely to see. It's particularly true as we're moving from addressing the logistical shifts and navigating the crisis toward the more emotional ones of profound loss and grief. And loss and grief aren't just associated with a person. They can be associated with the loss of some of the things I've mentioned, like graduation or simply routine, or the state of things and where we're going. And for some kids, whether they'll have a summer job or not. And maybe that's true for you. Specifically, it's worth noting changes from what you know or you've experienced in the past. Those are really good cues and important things to address. And I'm sure that your school has a way to address any heavy concerns that you have. Finally, behavior is tricky. The honest truth is that we can only control our own response to things, and our responses often impact the response we get in return. While many of us have probably wished for more time with our families, forced bonding is not what we envisioned. This might mean that while we're all trying to make the best of it, we're not always faced with our best selves. My mindfulness app reminds me daily that everyone around me wants to find happiness and avoid struggle. It prompts me to be kind. Remembering to be kind and see the struggle of the person in front of me when my stress level is high is not an easy task. Everyone's competing needs can often lead to us to try and control the other person's behavior or to fixate on their need to change. If you're like me, I have to remind myself regularly that many, if not most of us, are in a state of grief, loss, or anxiety, and that it's important for me to think flexibly and forgive myself daily. If you are feeling blue or you have people around you who might, we wanted to provide you with some crisis resources that are available nationally. As someone who is an international suicide prevention trainer, I think it's really important to talk about these things up front and to make sure that people have the resources to meet their needs and the needs of those around you. We're going to move into questions now.
Thank you, Jen. We did have one question. Everyone wants to know your mindfulness app. What do you use?
That's sure. So I do not promote them. I've tried lots of different ones, and the one that works for me is called Healthy Minds Program. It's a program that was out of the University of Wisconsin. It's a really cool app because it's not just meditation. It embraces the principles of social and emotional learning by creating opportunities for self-awareness and self-reflection on values and all sorts of things. And what I really like about it is the foundational part is free, it's very robust, and it helps you pick out how you do mindfulness. So I'm someone who can't do sitting mindfulness because I fall asleep. I don't know if other people resonate with that, but I'm an active mindfulness person, and it helps me to do that and use my senses. And the other thing I really like is you have the ability to tailor the time frame. So you can do it if you're ambitious for half an hour or for 5 minutes. And for me,
Nice.
to be able to do it for 5 minutes and feel like I got something robust out of it is the way that I can keep it going.
Great. So Mary now asked, her teachers are interested in learning more about trauma-informed teaching and SEL support for students. Do you offer training for schools?
So that is something very close to my heart. I mentioned that I worked in juvenile detention and diversion and in residential care facilities. I'm big on trauma-informed care. The other thing I'm big on is making sure you're not having a new initiative. So I like to look at whatever you're doing and how to just infuse some tips. Edmentum doesn't necessarily have a particular training on that, but as the SEL thought leader, if you had a need that we could help you meet and then help you figure out how to wrap a school around and resources around your kid, that's what we're here for. So I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it.
Great.
And you
Great.
can ping Nicole and she can connect us. Yes, the Healthy Minds program. And I think it's free right now.
Yeah.
What
and
else?
we're going to send out an email, and you might give us the weekend so we have time to decompress after this week, but we're going to send out an email next week that has Jen's contact information as well as my information, and all the resources that Jen has suggested. We do have a blog at edmentum.com where you can go to our blog and just type in the word SEL or the letters SEL, and you will see a lot of blogs that were actually written by Jen. So feel free to pop on over to edmentum.com. We'll send out all these resources to you in an email along with a recording of this session so that you will have that. And many people have asked us for her PowerPoint slide, and I think Jen said that she was going to make that available as well.
Sure.
And have any other questions before we wrap up?
I have a resource I can show you for the person who was interested in trauma-informed care. There's a really great book. You guys have probably heard about the ACEs, which is the Adverse Childhood Experience Scale. It helps measure early childhood trauma. And this is a book, and we'll put the name of it, but it's called Building Resilience in Students. And it is an educator approach to it. So it really looks at transformational PD and how to integrate trauma-informed practices in. So I'm happy to talk more about that with people if they're interested. And as Nicole mentioned, I also have a blog on addressing needs of IEP students during this time of schooling at home. And so that you might find that helpful from an equity perspective. I know that's a big question in people's minds.
Thank you all for coming on behalf of all of us. We really appreciate it. If there's any other questions, let me know. And the blog is at edmentum.com. I put in our chat box, I'm going to stick it one more time, the link to the participant guide so that you can find your way to the next session. Just look for session 3 and then look for the, if you don't remember your link, from the email that you received when you registered, feel free just to use the one that's in that participant guide and make your way to the next session. The next session, this ends at 4:10, and so we give everybody a 10-minute transition to go grab something to drink and take a break and come back and join us for our last session. Thank you guys so much. It's been a great session. Thank you, Jen. This has been wonderful to have you here today, and you have been very popular on both of your sessions, and we just appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I wish I could read everybody's chat. Let me know if you need anything else. Have a good day.
All right. Take care, guys. You guys are very welcome. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the sessions.
Absolutely.
Don't forget happy hour. Come back for happy hour. We'd love to hear from you then as well.
Thank you, Nicole, for hosting this. What a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. This has been a great, both sessions, absolutely wonderful. Everybody has loved it, very helpful. And you can tell because everybody has stayed the entire time. We've not, if anything, we've had more people join than we have had people drop off. So that's always indicator of a great session. So thank you.
Fantastic. You and I can touch base next week. I'll look forward to it.
We will. All
okay.
right.
Bye,
Yep.
everybody.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.